Okay, and so that would be Mrs. McClinton.
Okay, personnel and policy, do you want me to read it or do you want to go through it?
I can. This month we have 5 policies. The first policy is policy 011, Principles for Governance and Leadership. And if you recall, last month this was our informational item. It was it's the recommendation that PSBA had put forth that the new Principles for Governance and Leadership be added to the policy. So the change to that policy is adding in this language, PSBA's new recommended principles for governance and leadership, which replaces what they formerly had identified as standards for effective school governance. That's the only change, is replacing the old items there with the new. This is also, if you recall, once this policy would be adopted, PSBA asks to be notified so that they can send you the poster, which they would ask you to sign that you are going to employ these, and we would post that in the board room. Those are the recommended changes for policy 11. If there was any discussion about,
I'd like to make a motion to eliminate 2J as part of the change.
you can recommend revision. We wouldn't make a motion because we're just in committee. Am I correct on that? So you said section 2J.
Policy manual number 011, Code of Conduct for School Board Members, 2J. Communication with all stakeholders and the media will be conducted in accordance with board policy through the superintendent and/or board president.
We had discussed this earlier about tightening up that language, and one of the things that we had discussed in our committee meeting today was going to the PSBA, because I can see Ben's point about maybe about this being vague, and you don't want it to be vague, and asking them if they have any proposed language to help tighten that up, to help clarify why we have, help clarify the reason for the superintendent and the board president speaking to the media, but also putting language in there clarifying the board members themselves, speaking for themselves, may speak to not only may, but should speak to stakeholders, and may speak to the media, to giving their opinion, being clear that they don't represent the board. That is for the board president to say, we as a board, but you may speak to them. So we are going to talk to PSBA, get language, and then bring that forward for approval. We don't have a proposed language right now, but we do recognize the issue.
My proposed language will eliminate it. My question is, what's its point?
So I think,
What are you trying to accomplish? You're either trying to build something, sort of, or clarify, or you're trying to remedy. What does that do?
well, I think actually, so there's 2 pieces to that. One, you also have a policy 911, which is your news and media policy, which has the same language. It identifies that there will be 2 district spokespeople, the board president to speak on behalf of the board for district messaging, and the superintendent who would speak on behalf of the district. So this language is here, and it also is the language under policy 911, excuse me, which is community, which you find your media policy under. The intent, obviously every board member has the right to speak on behalf of themselves. The idea is here, just like with any large organization, there is always a representative, if you will, that speaks on behalf of an organization. You see this, with organizations of our size. We are a large organization, so that there is a consistent message that is given from the district side by our superintendent, as the face, if you will, as well as the board president as the face of the board. That does not prohibit anybody from being able to go, out into our hallway after a board meeting to do an interview, as long as they are representing themselves and their opinions and not speaking on behalf of the board.
When I read it, that's not what it says. And that's my problem, is there's 9 of us, and if you mix or change 9 others, you can get a different interpretation. And when I have to get somebody to interpret it, it's got unnecessarily complicated.
That's why we want to take it to language.
Yeah, and the other thing is, if you read it in reverse, And I have, it says the superintendent and/or board president. For me, it's not Superintendent Hall, President Kabilka, it's an X and a Y, whoever they may be. It seems like they could, at random, change them. I don't like the language at all. I don't understand what it's trying to accomplish. If what you said is true somewhere else, then get rid of this.
Yeah, let me piggyback on, and I do agree with you, Mr. Pike, as to the constitutionality of freedom of speech, which I believe there is a case, I'm still looking into it, where you cannot hold a publicly elected official to a different standard than you
That'd
would
be the
a
bond
citizen.
of Floyd that Mr. Pike referenced?
Yes, thank you. I'm still looking that up. That came into being with Justice Warren, I believe, in 1966. What I would like to recommend here, since Mr. Pike brought it up, is that whenever we have the first and final reading, that it goes to the first reading period. Because this will have to be tailored and brought back to this committee. Am I correct?
That is exactly what we have discussed, and that's what we're
Good,
doing.
okay, thank you.
Well, if I can comment on that too, I think you need some sort of general direction on speaking with stakeholders and the media.
Exactly.
And I think if you're speaking for the board, I think it should be the president and/or the superintendent.
No problem.
Not you, not me, not anybody.
As long as we don't
Okay.
represent ourselves as representing the
Well-
board, yeah.
Yeah, well, this is representing the board, right? I mean, if you were to go out, you can go out there just like Mr. Cavill said and say whatever you want to say.
My problem is somebody else gets there and interprets it differently, and all you need is 5 people.
If there's I think if anything is, if it's causing this much consternation because it is vaguely written, then we're going to go back and have this language tightened up so that it is very clear what our rights are as individual board members, and this is going forward for any 9 that are sitting up here, who speaks for the board and for the administration, and then when we're engaging the stakeholders, how we're doing it, in what capacity. And we're doing that as our individual capacity, because outside of this board, we have no authority. So we're gonna look into PSBA and see what they say as far as refining this language, so that it's not vague. If we've got a couple board members that find it to be vague, let's see if they offer any other suggestions.
I don't know, vague, it seems pretty clear, but.
You could put in the designation or their designee, because, I mean, you know, the media has shown up in a school and done a story and spoke with the principal there or something. So if you went by the direct policy, it says only the superintendent. But I guess I'm most worried about whether there would be any kind of a penalty inflicted on somebody, you know, if they spoke to the media, because that would be totally illegal. You know, that could be our recommendations, and it could be a standard operating procedure.
How is it
but,
illegal?
If you told somebody that they can't talk to the
We've
media.
never said that.
Right.
And that's
But
also not
it
really
almost-
Bonnie
it
Floyd.
almost says that.
No,
And
it
so-
doesn't. It does not say that. It does not say that you cannot talk to the media. It says who represent, and that's what we need to clarify, that it is who represents the board and who.
But doesn't it have the language that only the president and only
I-
the superintendent will
I
speak?
think, again, this is where I say it's vague. If you're saying only, but yet we're interpreting it to mean only the board president and only the superintendent can speak and say, I speak for the board, and yet we're saying, oh no, anyone can speak. It is only you, Mr. Kavelka, that may stand in front of the TV camera and say, I speak for the board, but any one of us may speak to the television, may speak to the reporter out in the hallway. But we cannot say we speak for the board. So this is why, because we have to have this discussion, that's why I mean it's a little